Hi, Bill Doherty, co-founder of the Doherty Relationship Institute. And I want to talk about incomplete narratives that are held by people who are on the brink of divorce. Almost always, by the way, there's a leaning out partner and a leaning in partner. They're usually no way together on this. And inevitably, very few or none of us have a full nuanced narrative or understanding of our own relationships, our own marriages, let alone why we're thinking of ending it or why my partner is thinking of ending it. Given human nature, maybe, we tend to focus on our spouse's contributions to the problems. We tend to think of in terms of their personality traits or their bad behavior. And maybe we think of ourselves in terms of, well, I've not always been perfect putting up with a difficult spouse, but I've done my part. And I'm going to be a little edgy here. A lot of people go to individual therapists about their marital problems, and the individual therapist does not have direct access to the spouse or the marriage. A lot of those therapists help create, in my opinion, a kind of one-sided narrative about this difficult person you've been with. So people get to the edge of divorce with incomplete, partial, maybe even partly distorted narratives of what has happened. And what Discernment Counseling offers, this approach that I've developed to work specifically with couples on the brink of divorce, what we work on is a more complicated, a more complete narrative of what's happened to the relationship and each person's contributions to the problems, okay? That's what we say the goal is: clarity and confidence about a direction based on a deeper understanding of what's happened. That's the narrative. And each person, like if I'm the client, my active role in the drama, as opposed to my just sort of a passive recipient here. I'm really convinced whatever they end up doing in discernment counseling with the future, whether divorce or work on their marriage and couples therapy, they gain from having a better narrative, a more complex narrative, less one-sided narrative. And if they go on to divorce, they will have learned, they will have learned from this divorce. Because for me, a terrible tragedy is if you don't learn anything from this, except that you married the wrong person, or you stayed too long, or you didn't assert yourself enough against a difficult person. Those are the things that people say, not very complicated. And then you just repeat the same pattern in other relationships. Or they learn something in discernment counseling about the narrative, the relationship, their own role, and the leaning out one goes, well, that's kind of interesting. I didn't realize, I'll give you an example. I didn't realize that I just didn't sort of fall out of love. I made thousands of small decisions to turn away from connection, to turn away from necessary conflict. I made a whole bunch of decisions. It sounds like my spouse did as well. And so we've gotten to this point where we hardly know each other. But it's not like some inevitable process occurred. It's, I was an active agent in this, and so is my spouse. So what does that tell me? It may tell me I can be an active agent of repair, or it may be that this relationship is really on death's door and it's going to be, we have to put it out of its misery. But I'm not going to make that mistake again. I'm not going to assume that love will just last. I'm going to really have to put myself into a relationship. So whether they divorce with a better understanding of what's happened, or they do therapy because now they're motivated because they see that they are co-creators of relationships. Either way, people benefit from a more complicated, more nuanced narrative of their relationship and their part in it.